Within minutes, all the Bennet daughters stood in a row in front of the newcomer.
"Mr. Bingley, allow me to introduce my family. This is my eldest daughter, Miss Bennet."
Jane curtsied gracefully.
Mr. Bennet continued, "My wife, Mrs. Bennet, my daughters, Miss Mary Bennet, Miss Catherine Bennet, and Miss Lydia Bennet."
The expression on Elizabeth's face spoke volumes. That, combined with Mr. Bingley's clear expectation of an introduction, caused the eldest gentleman to feel the shame for his lapse.
"I beg your pardon, Mr. Bingley. This is another of my daughters, Mrs. Carlton."
Bingley's happy smile diminished any cause for lingering awkwardness.
"It is my pleasure to meet all of you." "Where is your gentleman friend? What is his name?" Mrs. Bennet asked. "We should all be most delighted to meet him."
"He is Mr. Darcy, of Pemberley and Derbyshire. I shall be delighted to make your introductions during the course of the evening." The Bennets were obliged to move along, for several other families had lined up to meet Mr. Bingley. Not that he noticed. His eyes were fixed upon the face of an angel. As it turned out, Elizabeth did not have to work very hard on her sister Jane's behalf. Mr. Bingley requested Jane's hand to dance the first chance he got, and he kept his eyes on her throughout the set. Lydia and Kitty had made quite a spectacle of themselves with that turn of events. They had all stood together when Mr. Bingley approached their group. The girls had jostled to determine who might be in the best position to garner his attention, even to the point of being embarrassing. Bingley might not have noticed their antics, but Darcy surely had. From the moment he had noticed the eager mamma gather her daughters, all the time with an eye trained on his party, he knew exactly what was afoot. The last thing he wanted was to be introduced to a scheming mamma and her desperate wives-in-waiting. So he made his way to another part of the room. From that safe place he considered there was only one woman in the room he wished to meet. The prospect that she might be a part of that gathering entourage was unfathomable. His mind raced with intriguing thoughts of her.
"She is extraordinary."
As pleased as he was to have escaped the introductions to the Meryton determined to find a husband welcoming committee, he wanted to curse himself for missing his chance to meet the enchanting beauty who had captured his fancy, and who, for some strange reason unbeknownst to him, was amongst that first group that approached Bingley. An hour or so later, as Darcy observed the swarm of young ladies surrounding his young friend Bingley, he could only do so with disgust. He was not surprised to see his friend had singled out the lovely young woman with the angelic countenance.
"I had better caution him against spending too much time and attentions in that quarter, lest someone gets the wrong idea."
Soon, Darcy spotted his own angel on the dance floor. She possessed a measure of grace and poise which set her apart from all the other young ladies in the room.
Clearly, she is not of Meryton.
He surmised she must be from one of the prominent families of Hertfordshire. Her manner of walk, her style of dress, and a certain air of accomplishment demanded it. He moved closer to her to command a better view. Elizabeth would have had to be blind not to discern she was the object of his admiration. Whenever she occasioned to look in his direction, she found he always looked back at her. He did not attempt to hide it. The sensations she experienced in being an object of his esteem were pleasantly titillating. Never before had she felt such dizzying emotions under a man's gaze. Yet, the more he stared, the more Elizabeth's courage rose. She had suffered some disappointment in not having been properly introduced to him earlier in the evening. She saw that as no reason not to endeavour to know him better. Freed from the strictures of maidenly airs, she determined to put herself directly in his path. If he is bold enough to break with decorum and engage me in conversation, I certainly shall not stand on ceremony.